This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eli O'Sullivan-Kurtz. I am the Operations Specialist at Northland Neighborhoods Incorporated, and we are hosting this virtual town hall event with 4th District City Councilor Eric Bunch. We're excited to have you all here. We have received a huge number of questions. We anticipate we will not be able to get through all of them in the time that we have available, but we do have the chat open if anybody has any questions that you'd like to ask during the meeting. We'll try to get through as many of these as we can. Before we go any further, I want to welcome Councilman Bunch. How's it going today?
It's going great. It's the sun's poking out, so that's always a good day to have a little bit of rain and some sunshine at the same time.
Certainly, yes, and we've needed some rain around here, so it's good to get some. So like I said, we've got a lot of questions today. I'll go ahead and move into them, but first I do want to remind everyone to please keep your microphones muted. Again, we're trying to preserve audio quality here. So first question here is from Robert Martin. It's about city departments. It says the different departments of the city are fragmented and disconnected, e.g. Parks and Rec, city planning, public works, etc. They seem to be separate and difficult to coordinate. How will you lead to improve the organization of city departments so that services and projects are better coordinated?
Yeah, that's been, it's a great question. Often we refer to this as a siloing effect of our various departments. And, you know, and several of the questions that I saw pop up are about infrastructure. And you know, something as simple as a sidewalk can often involve 3 or 4 different departments. You have the planning department who comes up with the plans, long range and short range plans, and then you have the public works department who typically is hiring a contractor or building those things themselves, but then it may involve water because water oversees all of the storm basins and that sort of thing. And then it could be on a boulevard, which are under the purview of the parks department and the parks board. And the lack of communication between those two, I do think it's getting better, but it's one of the major points of contention that I expressed, and even years ago as I got started doing community advocacy in Kansas City, and just seeing the missed opportunities that we often experience because of that lack of communication and coordination. So what I think our opportunity is we're about to hire a new city manager. I don't have any updates, unfortunately, on that for you today, but I can tell you that I have been expressing in our conversations about the qualities we're looking for in that new city manager. One of those is someone who is going to be creative in solving problems, both externally and internally, and helping to unlock the true potential we have in City Hall among our staff. And so that is, I think, a huge opportunity, and I'm not the only one expressing those concerns on the council. I think there's a recognition from everyone that we need to do a better job of coordinating between those. But our real big opportunity is you'll start seeing when we start opening up the public conversations about city manager. Because as you probably know, we have an interim city manager right now who's doing a great job, but has no intention of sticking around as the full-time permanent city manager. So we will be hiring someone this year to replace Troy Schulte after he left and went to the county. So again, I think we're going to be looking for a person who can run the city and help manage that better and really encourage much better coordination, because that's absolutely something that I believe has to improve for our city to function really well. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So these next questions are all related to COVID-19. This first one is from me, Eli O'Sullivan-Kurtz. What resources are available to keep 4th District residents safe as Kansas City reopens in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, you know, I'm very much a person who thinks we should be erring on the side of caution, and I have to give a lot of credit to the mayor at the outset of this, really taking the lead, both at the city and regionally, really, and bringing what we're calling the core 4 into the conversation and making sure everyone was in alignment as we slowly, or I mean rather quickly, I guess, but phased into the various restrictions on gatherings and business operations and that sort of thing. So, you know, I give Mayor Lucas a lot of credit for stepping up to the plate on that. And I think also the fact that we are seeing, I would argue maybe for a bit there, an unprecedented level of cooperation between regional partners across the state, both sides of the state line, between Jackson County, Johnson County, Wyandotte County, and then even our, to some degree, our other counties as well. We've had some trouble, and I think that might come up, the coordination with CARES funding. But, you know, I think that we've done a pretty good job. The thing that I'm concerned about now is, and we're prepared to deal with this, and I don't want to make anyone feel alarmed, but I feel like we're in a very good position to start to slowly reopen the economy. We've done a couple of really important things, ordinances that we just passed last week as an example, to provide an opportunity for businesses like restaurants and taverns to reopen safely by taking some of their parking lot space. They don't need all the parking right now because the capacity is lower, but basically give an opportunity for people to add outdoor seating that they otherwise wouldn't be able to. So I'm really proud of the work that Councilwoman Boo and I and Mayor Lucas and the city staff, particularly the legal department, came up with some really brilliant ideas, I think, to help open up safely and get people back to work and the economy back going. But the thing, as I mentioned, as I'm concerned about is what happens if we start to see another spike in cases. And we're at the point where we're starting to slowly open, but we can dial that back if we have to. We're prepared for that. I'm going to err on the side of caution. I'm going to urge for us to err on the side of caution. But we are putting a lot of protections in place for us to start to that reopening process. You know, we unfortunately, and I laugh, and it's not a laughing matter, but you know, Missouri made national news because of stuff that's happened down at Lake of the Ozarks, and you know, I think that we're smart in asking any of those people to self-isolate as needed, but we have to be prepared that the rest of the state is not following the same lead. And so, in the absence of that leadership at the state level, we're gonna do it. And I think that we've done a pretty good job. And again, I applaud Mayor Lucas for doing that. But another thing that we really need to make sure is in place, and you probably saw an article in the newspaper about it this weekend, is that as a region, we've got to do a better job of contact tracing and testing. And so there's a call for, you know, volunteers in some parts of the region to help with contact tracing. We're trying to hopefully secure some more money as you know, the HEROES Act moves forward. We're hoping that there will be some more federal support for that. But the only way we're going to open up safely and get closer to normal is if we're doing adequate testing and contact tracing, and with the hope that there's a vaccine soon. So we're working on that and working on funding to help the health department make sure that that's a reality. But it's got to be a region-wide effort, and I think that we've done I think that the mayor and the council have done a pretty good job of having that regional coordination. So still work to do, and we're ready to pivot and go either direction, to more open, to less open, as needed. And so we're in constant contact with the health department to make sure that we're doing the right things.
Wonderful, thank you. There's a quick question here from the chat. This is from Andrea Clark. My brother applied for pandemic unemployment a few weeks ago and is still waiting for a response. Any updates on that at the state level?
I don't have an update on that at the state level, but that's something that I can find out. I know that there's obviously, as you all know, there's been an unprecedented level of applications for unemployment. You know, we're an unbelievably high unemployment right now, and we're hoping that, you know, all the economists are saying this will be after we get to a point where we're safe and healthy, this can be a quick rebound. But in the meantime, we've got to make sure people are supported as they're unemployed. And so we'll follow up and reach out to to our folks at the state level to see what's happening in the unemployment office to make sure that we're responding to these applications as quick and approving them as quickly as possible.
Great, thank you very much. So next question here comes with a little bit of context. This is from Wilson Vance. The current eviction moratorium in Jackson County will end on May 31st. We know that homeless shelters are already full and unsafe, and we also know that there's funding coming from the CARES and HEROES Acts that will go directly to funding rental assistance. So the questions, there are two. Do you support an extension on the eviction moratorium that ends May 31st? And are you willing to call 16th Circuit Providing Judge David Byrne, urging him to do so before it's too late and families are put on the street during a pandemic?
Yeah, Wilson, I can't see if you're on the call or not, but thanks. Oh yeah, there you are. Good to see you. Thanks for that question, and absolutely. So if maybe we could connect offline to find out what else I can do to help usher that along, but we need to make sure that we are not kicking people out on the streets right now. Now is not the time to add to our population of people experiencing homelessness, and it's the absolute wrong time to be putting people out of their homes. So I support the continuation of that moratorium, and I will gladly help in whatever way that I can. So thanks for bringing that to my attention, and please connect with me via email or whatever to let me know exactly how I can help.
Wonderful, thank you. So this next question comes in from Joe Q. The question is, Jackson County is holding the COVID-19 relief money tightly, but the council funds free bus service by reallocating funds from other areas such as pothole repair, which is a basic infrastructure need. So the question is Jackson County cutting its budget accordingly?
I'm not sure I totally understand the question about the relationship with Jackson County. They're obvious, yeah, we're challenged to get our fair share of the CARES Act money from them, from Jackson County and Clay County right now. Both are, but we are in the process of moving that forward with an agreement with both of those cities. So on the CARES Act side, and that only covers expenses that we as a city have incurred for COVID response. And why it's so important that, and why we should be the beneficiary or the recipient of that directly. Unfortunately, that's not the case. But in many cities across the state, in many cities, the health department is actually a function of the county. And in our case, we have our own health department that's actually experiencing the burden of the cost, as well as our first responders and EMS. And so that's why we need to make sure that we're in the next round of federal funding that we actually get it directly. We are not like other cities in the state of Missouri, outside of a handful. We have our own health department. So I just wanted to clarify that. And on the free bus conversation, we're not actually diverting any money away from potholes. We're actually still not giving as much money to the ATA as we actually pull in taxes. We have two dedicated taxes for public transportation. One is a 3/8 cent sales tax and one is a 1/2 cent sales tax. And one of the cases, one of those taxes, we're actually diverting some of that money away. The voters approved ballot language that said this money is intended to go to public transportation. We upped the amount of money that we are giving them this year, and the intent, yes, is for them to implement zero fare transit. However, my argument has been it's their money. We've just been diverting it away from them, from that sales tax. We're not actually taking any money away from potholes. We're getting closer to the share of the funding that goes to them that the voters approved, which is $4.5 million extra this year. And I would also argue that potholes are absolutely critical. Streets are critical infrastructure, but so is public transportation. So investments in public transportation, whether the ATA turns around and does zero fare transit or improves service, regardless of how they spend it, that is critical infrastructure, especially in the time of, in the 4th district, about a quarter of households don't have access to a car. In pockets like my neighborhood, it's over half of households don't have access to a car. So making transit work better for everyone, and in this case, making the fare zero, especially in today's time where so many people are unemployed, that is critical infrastructure. And we're just making sure that the ATA is getting the money that we're actually collecting in taxes that's due to them. And we're not even there yet. We're still diverting some away. So multi-parter there, but going forward, the next round of funding hopefully from the federal government will provide some support to local governments, state and local governments, because we're the ones who could potentially go bankrupt. We can't print our own money like the federal government can, and we can't deficit spend. We can't legally deficit spend. So we're going to make sure that we're hoping that the next round of federal funding can help support not only the costs that we're incurring as a result of the response to COVID-19, but that we're actually helping fill any shortfalls in funding as well. And so every city and state is going to be grappling with that. But we're very, very optimistic that the HEROES Act will help defray some of those costs.
Excellent, thank you. So we're going to move on from the topic of COVID directly and ask a question here about the census. It's actually more of just a discussion topic. This is from Ramona Ferris. And they say, discussion on completing the 2020 census. I'm happy to assist if you need resources, as I'm working with Rick Usher and KC Complete Count Committee.
Yeah, I'll just be very brief on this, but if you have not already, get online and do the online census form. It's very fast. I did it for my whole family of 5. Luckily, 2 of the birthdays, you'll have to remember everyone's birthday. So luckily 2 of the birthdays in my case were the same because I have twins. So it made it a little bit easier it made it more like 4 than 5, but it took 7 minutes tops. So you can do it really quickly and do it fast. We're actually undercounting right now. And if we get to the end and we're undercounted, that means it could mean a loss of millions for the city of Kansas City. And so we want to make sure that also that the 4th district has everyone counted, because it's how we determine council district boundaries moving forward. So after we get the data in as a city, we rely on that census data to redraw our boundaries every 10 years. So I want to make sure that every 4th district resident is counted, and I want to make sure every city resident is counted. But since most of us here are probably from the 4th district, please get on and do that. Now, what the response looks like, or what the next phase where the federal government actually sends people out knocking on doors, canvassing neighborhoods to do the count, I don't know what that looks like. That's, I think, still in flux. What the census looks like this year, and even if it's potentially delayed, is still up in the air. But we have the opportunity to get as many of us counted right now. You should have gotten a little form in the mail. You can also Google, fill out the census form, but you should have gotten a letter in the mail, and you have a code on there, and you fill that out, and it's really, really simple. So please get in. It's absolutely critical that everyone in Kansas City is counted.
Wonderful, thanks. And as someone who also has filled out the census online, I just want to emphasize that it was a very quick and painless process. So thanks for asking folks to go do that. A quick update for those of us who are tuned in here. Councilman Bunch's aides, especially Chrissy Dastrup, have been posting some information in the chat that includes how to sign up for newsletters and sharing a couple of additional questions and answers. We also have Andrea Clark in the chat, who has provided a link to the census website. That's 2020census.gov. So anyone can go there and fill that out if need be. Now, moving along, we have a question here about development. This is from Joe Q. Why is the council continuing to authorize additional expenses, such as the soccer lot, $43 million in the Northland, and new contracts for eviction issues, with the realization that revenues are going to be seriously lower than projected, and additional millions will be required for power and light debt service, as well as the new Lowe's Hotel? So just to kind of summarize that, the heart of the question is, why is the council continuing to authorize additional expenses in the midst of everything going on right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. In some cases, I think that it's important that we actually shift our budget priorities, because this is absolutely unprecedented times. So some of our budget is going to have to shift naturally to COVID response. And I would argue, I think, and most of the council has agreed to this, that some of that involves eviction support, and so that may be in reference to our recent hiring of Heartland Jobs and Freedom. I hope I have that correct, the name correct, but so that's to help support people who are experiencing or facing eviction, among other things. So I think that still is very vital. That's not new spending. That's something that was already in the budget. That was something that we budgeted for. In regards to the soccer complex, there are probably people on the call here who will disagree with me, but I was one of the 3 no votes on that, primarily because we don't know what our financial future looks like as a city. And in addition to that, we're taking on a $40 million capital improvement, not to mention the ongoing upkeep and maintenance of that. And I bet every one of us has a park in their neighborhood that's in need of maintenance that unfortunately is not getting it, and we're deferring maintenance over and over again. And my primary concern with voting against that, or why I voted against that, was it sets a new precedent. And like, that was how we're paying for the capital. And again, we don't necessarily have a way that we've identified how we're going to pay to maintain it, but how we're paying down the debt service on that is by redirecting an expired TIF. So the TIF, the tax increment financing, generates a certain amount of sales tax that would typically go towards things like potholes and parks maintenance and other things. So what we decided to do, and the idea is that after a TIF expires, after 23 years is all statutorily we can allow it to happen, for that money to be diverted. Typically after 23 years, that money comes back to the city so that we can spend that pothole money wherever we need. And there's still potholes in the area of that TIF. So we still have to maintain that. But we decided to continue redirecting beyond the 23-year lifespan of that TIF to pay down the debt, not the maintenance, but just pay down the debt service on the capital expense of that new infrastructure. So that's why I voted no. I don't dislike soccer. I love soccer. I think it's amazing. It's a great sport. It can be a very inclusive sport. But given today's financial uncertainty, as well as the precedent setting that this would do policy-wise, I was a no vote on that. I'll continue to push for thoughtful expenditures. And so I appreciate the question that came forward. But we have to be careful. And you may have noticed that I pushed for a more fiscally conservative budget proposal that unfortunately, did not get enough votes to pass through when we were looking to amend the budget. So I was pushing for a budget that actually didn't cut anyone's funding, but it reduced some of the increases. And so I'm a believer that we're going to have some new spending as a result of the response to COVID-19, but we have to be very careful about other new spending to make sure that any budget shortfalls that we experience, and we're going to experience significant budget shortfalls in particular areas, that we make sure that we still provide a good quality of life for the citizens of Kansas City. And so I'm going to keep trying to be a good financial steward. And my colleague, 4th District at Large, Councilwoman Katheryn Shields, is very good at keeping an eye on those sorts of things. So, in your 4th District Council people, you have 2 people who are going to be working very hard to make sure that we are smart with the money that we do have, because we know that we're going to see shortfalls.
Great, thank you very much for that. We're going to answer a bunch of questions here that are sort of all broadly related to the subject of streets and sidewalks. I suspect that some of these will probably be answered ahead of time by other questions. So if we ever get to a question and it feels like you've already answered it, just reference that earlier answer and we'll go ahead and save a little time that way. So first question is from Randy Mixdorf. The question is, with more people biking as a social distancing activity, do you think the KC Bike Master Plan will gain more traction with those in City Hall as well as with residents throughout the city?
Yeah, so we actually, for anyone's reference, there was an effort to update the city's bicycle master plan a couple years ago. That wrapped up, and the plan has been sort of held in limbo. The previous council considered it briefly, and then didn't take a vote on it. And so it came over from the previous council, is now here. And so, as you probably know, I'm a big supporter of multimodal infrastructure. And so the bike plan is something that I will be working towards seeing adopted and move forward. Now, I say this a lot, and if you heard me talk on KCUR today, I want to be careful about planning efforts we undergo right now, not because I believe we can chew gum and walk at the same time, to use that old saying, but I want to make sure that when we do make big changes, and the bike plan has gone through a long series of public engagement, so I don't want to use that, maybe is not the best example, but I do want to be mindful of the fact that we're not in a position right now where community engagement is equitable. It's very difficult for people to participate, and so we need to be mindful of how we make decisions and make sure that community outreach that we do in planning efforts, be it a new bike plan or a new complete streets plan for a particular street, we need to just be careful about how do we equitably and adequately engage the community to make sure that everyone's had an opportunity to provide feedback. So long answer to a simple question, but I do, speaking specifically to bikes, bike shops are experiencing an unprecedented boom, which is really, really wild. So for whatever reason, people are getting out and buying lots of bikes and bike accessories right now, because I think it is a great way for people to get exercise and still be physically distanced from one another. But at the same time, we need to make sure that our trails are well maintained. We need to make sure that our streets are safe. And so I do think that bicycling is something that's gaining a lot of steam right now. And so we do need to make sure that we move forward on the bike plan. And additionally, the last thing I'll say is that we recently passed a Vision Zero resolution, which is, for those of you who aren't familiar, Vision Zero is a shift to a new traffic safety paradigm, where we're saying that traffic violence or traffic safety is paramount, but traffic violence, fatalities, and serious injuries are not just the cost of doing business. They're preventable through systems change, through how we design streets. So we passed that unanimously as a committee, and then almost unanimously as a council. So that's another way of us kind of rethinking how streets are safe for everyone, particularly our most vulnerable users and our most vulnerable citizens, who are often the frontline workers who are still going to work every single day during this pandemic. We need to make sure that that transit is safe and healthy, and people aren't exposing themselves to the virus. Again, those frontline workers who are often dependent on alternative modes of transportation like transit. We also need to make sure that our streets are safe for them to walk or bike or whatever the mode is they use. And so that's something that I'll continue to be working on, and making sure that we're doing it in an equitable fashion.
Great, thank you. Next question comes in from Robert Russell. What progress regarding the replacement and renovation of curbs and sidewalks has been made in the 4th District?
Yeah, Robert, I think I was supposed to get some info back to you, I think the last time you asked, so I apologize for not getting back to you with that info. So sidewalks are moving forward. You may remember a few years ago when we voted when Kansas City citizens voted to overwhelmingly to support the GEO bond. Question 1 of that infrastructure bond was to improve sidewalks at no cost to the adjacent homeowner, adjacent homeowner. So that is moving forward still. I don't know of any specific delays as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think crews are still moving forward with that, because construction and infrastructure was considered an essential activity. So what I'm going to do is I'm overdue for an update on how we're doing in the most recent contracts. So if anyone has ever gone out to their sidewalk and seen, if they have one, I know a lot of people on this call probably don't even have a sidewalk in front of their house. But if you've ever noticed a little white X or little white arrows painted onto the sidewalk, that's an indication that they've actually come out and inspected your sidewalk, which also means that they probably have it in a contract with a contractor to come out and actually fix. So there are a lot of those out there. There's been some delay as a result of some contracting issues, but another thing that we've done in the 4th district is PIAC set aside a little bit of money specifically for some sidewalk repairs. So we're still moving forward on some of that as well. So I will get an update on where we are with some of those contracts and what the next steps are for the newest tranche of sidewalk improvements. So exciting. And hopefully we'll get some information on this, and I do think it's an exciting thing that we've been doing for the past few years of doing a much better, I would say, getting closer to a proactive approach to sidewalk maintenance.
Great, thank you very much. So the next question, there are actually a few statements here that are all from Tim Johnston. I will try to kind of add these together. So first of all, Tim says that he and his neighbors don't want any more delays to the reconstruction of North Oak Trafficway from Briarcliff Parkway north to Vivian Road. It's scheduled for 2022. It's an $8.5 million project that's been moved back twice. It says, please keep it as scheduled or move it forward if possible. Tim also points out some needed updates in the Waterworks Park, particularly the southern portion of the sidewalk perimeter trail. And he hopes that next year's 4th district PIAC dollars can address those improvements. And then finally, we heard that street sweeping and cleaning our streets was reinstated. Can we expect the streets in the Briarcliff or Crestview neighborhoods to be swept and the stormwater drains on Briarcliff Parkway to be cleared soon? And I know that a few folks, including folks in the chat, have asked questions about new street sweeping or the reinstating of street sweeping practices. So maybe that's something you could talk about a little longer.
Yeah, so that's an interesting topic. I never expected street sweeping to be like the first like controversial hot button topic we covered as the vice chair of Transportation Infrastructure and Operations Committee, but it was, and for a variety of reasons. But what I will say is that we did reinstate. The water department sort of abruptly ended that, and why it's a function of the water department is kind of a whole other can of worms. But basically it's because primarily why we are continuing the very minimal amount of street sweeping we're doing is to keep stuff from the storm drains. And so, and it's largely as a result of the consent decree that we have with the EPA. And so to make sure that we're not, we have a combined sewer stormwater system for much of the 4th district, basically all of it south of the river. And so I do believe that I know that I've seen them out, and I know that I had an update not too long ago that they've been ripping and roaring on street sweeping, but you're still only going to see it twice a year on your street at best. And so I can find out for sure how they're prioritizing the storm drain cleaning. But my suspicion is that it's probably they're prioritizing the areas with that combined storm sewer, because what happens, to give you the gross details, when we get, typically you're here, my house, basically every house in the 4th district south of the river, and almost all the 3rd district, parts of the 5th, parts of the 6th, are in this combined system where, our water going down the drain of whatever type goes straight into the storm drain. And when it's not raining heavily, it just goes right into the water treatment plant. When it rains heavily, it overflows that system and it bypasses because the water treatment facility can't handle that. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that things don't clog that storm drain system. And so I'm guessing that so anytime there's a clog, that creates some more problems with that overflow, or makes it more likely for it to overflow. And that's why you have Brush Creek, which is in very, very rough condition, as many of you know, and other streams as well. But I'll find out for sure how we're prioritizing and what we're doing to improve the quality of service when it comes to street sweeping, because honestly, like, the level of street sweeping service that we get is minimal. It's barely enough. Like I said, your street's going to see a street sweeper twice in a year, because we have 6,000 lane miles of streets to maintain, and that's potholes and and street sweeping. But and we put about $2 million a year into the street sweeping budget, which is not a lot when you think about like running a street sweeper basically day in, day out for an entire year. But I'll find out how they're prioritizing all that, and also see what we can do about improving the street sweeping service. And in the long run, what is it going to cost, and how can we justify that expense?
Wonderful, thank you. So we have two more questions here in the sidewalk and streets section of our chat. The first question is from Anna Roseborough. She says, you were at our meeting at the Tony Aguirre Community Center last year when we discussed our sidewalks on Southwest Boulevard. The last time our sidewalks were updated was in 1978. Bad sidewalks and roads in this area cause accidents. Can we do something about this?
Yeah, right now, we can look to see if it's in the hopper for improvement, but if it's not, then we can look to other sources of funding. PIAC is one that we've, right now we're focusing on one area with PIAC. The idea is it will take that to other areas so you can concentrate it. It's still a conversation that I have to have with the two PIAC reps and my 4th district colleague, Councilwoman Shields. But we could look to the west side as being one of the next neighborhoods to be a recipient of that, that little bit of money we've set aside. So there are opportunities, and I know I've talked to you about that particular one, and it's definitely needs to be a priority. And as sidewalks connecting public transit and connecting people to parks, to schools is always on my priority list. But what I can promise is that we will do what we can to make sure that happens in a reasonable amount of time. And the unfortunate reality is we've underinvested in sidewalks for decades. For so long, it was the responsibility of the property owner, and as a result, there was no system in place to make sure that sidewalks were maintained and repaired in a timely manner. And so it got to the point where sidewalks are crumbling into dust and in so many places, and now we're left with $1.5 billion backlog of sidewalk needs, both new sidewalks that never existed in the first place and repairs. So what we have to do a better job of is prioritizing the money we do have. We have about $7 million, $7.5 million a year out of the GO bond that we've set aside, plus in the 4th district, a little bit we've set aside our PIAC. What we need to do is make sure that we're prioritizing so that no one feels left behind, but also we're doing enough to actually make a substantive impact on neighborhoods in a positive way. So we're going to work on that, and I can't promise that it's going to happen overnight, but it's something that's very much at the top of my mind is how do we do that? And specifically, in that case, the sidewalk on Southwest Boulevard, we're going to find a way to do it.
Wonderful, thank you. Last question about streets and sidewalks for now comes from Matt Fuoco. He has some concerns that he raises about a development project, or multiple development projects rather, going on from 46th Street between Jefferson and Summit north to 44th Street. Apparently there have been a lot of 311 cases that have been reported about various construction projects going on here. And Matt would like to know, can you please commit to arranging a meeting with the city codes and public works departments and the PWNA representatives to get a plan in place to resolve these many issues?
Yeah, we can work to connect the right departments. Again, back to the original question, the very first question about lack of coordination between departments. That's one thing that I think we can help with, is to make sure that everyone is talking, so we can bring the people in the room, and so Chrissy and I will get to work on that. And please provide us with your contact information, and we'll make sure that we loop you in on that. And then we can get the specific details of where it's happening and what the cases are. We could look into those 311 cases, and we can also to facilitate that conversation. And a broader policy issue, something that I'm very keen on doing, and I've been a bit interrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and our focus has really shifted towards response there, and then just treading water often and in this response. But one thing that I have been really wanting to work on is also sort of in the same vein as the coordination between departments, but we need to do a much better job of coordination with our utility companies who are often cutting up sidewalks. That's been a very big issue in the 4th District with the Spires gas main improvements. There are sidewalks destroyed all over the city. My neighborhood is one of those areas where we're seeing that, but I've seen it in the South Plaza. I've seen it in Columbus Park and the West Side. It's all over. And so making sure that we know when that's happening and that there's adequate community, like an alert that that's actually going to come to your neighborhood. But then making sure that we're holding those contractors and those utilities accountable for when they create a bunch of damage and don't come back and fix it, and that's done in a timely manner. And that's true for developers as well, who are in contractors who may be destroying the sidewalks or the streets, or closing off streets and sidewalks without any warning. So something that I'm very, very interested in doing, and something that means a lot to me personally, is making sure that we're holding those contractors and utilities accountable for the damage they do to the streets and sidewalks and the inconvenience that they pose to our residents.
Certainly, yes. So like I said, we're done with these streets and sidewalks questions for now. Thank you very much for your time on those. We have several other questions that have been submitted, but I want to shift over to some chat submitted questions just to give folks who are tuned in live a chance to have some things addressed. First here is a question from Alexander Eskelson. It is, as the city reopens and companies call their employees back in, will there be any way for workers to signal potential labor violations to the city? I'm worried that since so many will be desperate for work, conditions workers face may deteriorate. Some municipal oversight here seems appropriate.
Yeah, I don't have a great answer of how that will work, but it's something that we absolutely need to make sure, whether that's right now, as far as I know, the main recourse is a report to the health department. There are other avenues as well, but I want to make sure that we have a way for employees to report retaliation against from their employers when they report problems, or a way for them to say that the people are being fired because they are being forced to not wear a mask or things like that. So I want to make sure that as we reopen this economy gradually and safely, that employees are afforded an opportunity to express concerns that they have about their workplace. I will make sure that we find out what the process is now and what ways it can be improved, but it's vital that we protect our frontline workers in particular, because they're the ones who have been facing this pandemic head on. But any employee should be able to express concern about being put in an unhealthy situation. So we'll get back to the group on how that looks, though.
Wonderful. I've received notice that there may be a quick moment for Councilwoman Shields to chime in here. I think she was going to try to join by phone. Councilwoman Shields, are you here today? Maybe not anymore. If you are, please feel free to go ahead and unmute and cut me off, but I'm going to go ahead and move along with the rest of the questions we have here. This question comes in from Olga Patenko, and I noticed that CIO Lance Lenz is on the call as well, so this may be something that he could chime in on. Olga asks, last week we had 5 nights in a week with gunshots and violence. What is the plan to address this?
Yeah, it's alarming, and I've talked to several folks in the neighborhoods where these occurred, and we, although not recently, but we've experienced a gun battle in front of our house, and under no circumstances is that acceptable. What is happening now is, I'm glad that we have someone from KCPD here to help answer. I'm still trying to get information about what's going on. My next step is understanding what's happening. Are these issues related? Because it sounds like many of them are rolling gun battles that have occurred in parts of the 4th district, mostly south of the river, as far as I know. So understanding kind of what's going on, but first step is that we're looking at in one area of where apparently the perpetrators of this retreated to a park in a dark, unlit parking lot to help. A potential solution there is if that's an area where this is happening and people are using the cloak of darkness to regroup or whatever, but also looking at potentially installing a handful of cameras in places like that. I'm sometimes reluctant to say that we need to have camera surveillance every single place, but where we know that problems occur. Another example is we're looking at installing cameras at an illegal trash dumping site where it's not just the trash dumping, but there's a lot of other illicit activities going on there. So those are the quick solutions that we're looking for. And of course, there are always long-term solutions. These are very deep societal challenges. And until we really adequately begin to address the disinvestment in parts of our community and the systematic racism that has led to that disinvestment, we're going to have to be taking these short-term approaches. And if anyone from KCPD is here, I'd love to know if there's any other information on the violence that we've seen recently.
I'm here, Eric. Lance Lenz. I'm the CIO at North Patrol Division. Thank you for the opportunity to be a part of the group. This obviously is a very tough problem for the entire city. It's a problem that all of the city leaders have been working on for quite some time. Unfortunately, they're not easy answers. Some of the things that Councilman Bunch said are spot on. I think it is a societal problem. I think it is a criminal justice problem as a whole. And I think we really need to look at the criminal justice problem. When I say it holistically, what I mean is it's not just the police department. You also have the prosecutorial efforts. You have the jail space is a part of it. Probation and parole is a part of it. Two things I would like to highlight from the police perspective. I can only speak from the police perspective. I can't speak for the prosecutor's office, and I can't speak for the jail space issue. But the two biggest problems that we have are when we do have victims of violent crime, specifically aggravated assault, which, if you think about it, an aggravated assault is just basically it's a homicide that the person had bad aim. So when you have live victims who have been the victim of an aggravated assault and they've lived through it, the problem the police department has is they don't cooperate with us. The majority of our aggravated assault victims do not follow through with prosecution. So what does that tell us? It means that they want to handle it themselves, or they want their family members to handle it. And that is probably the biggest problem Kansas City has, is the majority of our inner city aggravated assaults are retaliatory shootings. These are folks who are shooting at each other repetitively, and that spawns new shootings. And it just creates more and more chaos, and the numbers go up and up, and the victims fail to cooperate with the police, and they handle it themselves, which means more shootings. A lot of the shootings that have occurred recently, we've been able to document that we had law enforcement presence in the area. It's not a deterrence. It's tough. If the victims won't cooperate with you and you can't submit cases, and then if they won't cooperate with the prosecutor's efforts to prosecute the case, and then there's no jail space, it's a very complex, holistic problem. I won't ramble on and on, but if anyone has a follow-up question, I'm happy to do my best.
Thank you very much, Officer Lenz.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for jumping in there. I really appreciate the law enforcement perspective on this. And on the specific issue of the, I know that we're still as a district council members, and Chrissy and I are still trying to get more of the specific details on these particular incidents. So once we find that out, we're going to make sure that's shared with people. So don't hesitate to reach out when you have concerns of crime and things going on in your neighborhood. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. We've got a great resource with our PIOs. It's great to have them, and so but let us know as well if there's anything we can look into from the council perspective. And I would also add that it's exactly right when it's not just about law enforcement, and it is about our court system, and municipal court I think is doing a pretty good job, but we suffer from other challenges as well in that regard. But also, I'm a big believer in public health and treating crime of all sorts as a public health issue, and working towards solutions that also incorporate access to mental health care and social workers. And so I commend the police department for continuing to invest in social workers as well. But it's going to take a lot of effort in the long run to make sure that we make a safer community. And I'm definitely committed to that. But on the specific other issues, we'll definitely find out what's been going on and see if there's any developments in the investigation on those crimes.
So I have one additional thing I can add.
Yeah.
Might be helpful. So from the time period of May 11th to May 17th, approximately a 6-day period, we had 10 aggravated assaults. 8 of those 10 people shot failed to cooperate with the police investigation. That's 80%. That highlights how difficult this problem is.
Certainly, yes. We are coming to the final 5 minutes or so of our time here. So I have been informed that Councilwoman Shields has indeed joined the call. I'm going to go ahead now and she can say a few words. Councilwoman Shields, you should be good to go.
Thank you. It's so good to have everyone gathering together. Right here we have about 80 people. So that's wonderful to see that interest in this time of the coronavirus, that we still want to know what's happening in our community, and we want to work together to figure out how to make it better. I just want to commend all of our frontline people, whether it's the police or fire department or our code inspectors, our hospital people, just for the valiant work under very difficult circumstances that they are all doing now. And on my part, I'm glad to see. I'm a little worried, but I'm glad to see that things are opening up a little bit. But as one of those people that is over 70, as Dr. Archer said, people over 70 need to stay home and not go out. And so I hope anyone who's on this call and today, if you're over 70, that you will follow that advice and be very, very careful. And then also individuals who have underlying health issues that they need to be concerned about. I hope you all are very careful as well. I hope everyone, when they're going out in public, is wearing a mask, particularly, not so much if they're out by themselves walking, but if you go into a grocery store or a shop or come into a more congested area, I hope you slip that mask up over your nose and mouth, because you're protecting the public, and we need to do that. So again, I'm just excited that so many people are interested, and I hope you all continue to have a very good holiday week. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks for joining in. Appreciate you hopping on.
So, like I said, we're in the final minutes of our meeting today, and we have a few more questions that I think we can get through. So I'll go ahead and jump into these. Shannon Jones asks, do you support promotion of minority-owned businesses when the city contracts out work, such as catering contracts?
Absolutely. We have, and we can always split hairs on how well that's working. I think that it could always be better, but every single, I wouldn't say every single, but most of our contracts, of our larger contracts, medium size and large contracts, and if Councilwoman Shields is on here, she's probably knows what the cutoff is on MBWB. But I absolutely support encouraging and hiring more minority and women-owned businesses to conduct work for the city. Almost every project that we do, as I was saying, getting into earlier, every project we do, every contract we hire out, there's a goal established for what percentage of the work is going to be done by MBEWB, minority business enterprise or women-owned business enterprise. So I support that going forward, and we've got great allies in the council who are always asking the tough questions, and my colleague Councilwoman Robinson is always making sure that we get those questions answered, because it's vital that we provide opportunities for our for our contractors who may just be getting started out and are at a disadvantage because of a variety of reasons, one of which is often their race. So yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful, thank you. This question has been asked by a couple of folks. I'll use the wording from Matt Floco. Wouldn't local control of the police department allow for the city to better set priorities of the police department and not a board appointed by Governor Parsons? Why are we the only department in the country that operates like this?
That's a good question, and it's a tough one to answer. I've come out in support of local control. I think that right now, how it depends. It depends on the city's relationship with the governor, and Governor Parson, I think, has a pretty good relationship, probably better than what we've seen and what we saw with the previous not full-term governor. We're seeing a little bit better cooperation there. However, it can be difficult to when the police department responds to when they report to a state appointed board, it doesn't give us the opportunity to weigh in on policy. And so really what we're guaranteed is that we approve their budget, which is a critical part of their work, of course, but we're never going to hold the budget hostage to get for leverage. But at the same time, we don't always have a close, tight relationship with the police commission. So, I do think that we would have more ability to determine how each of those dollars is spent if we had local control, and for that reason alone, I'm supportive of local control of the police department. Now, it's a challenge because it requires a statewide vote. So we would have to make sure it gets on the ballot at the state level. St. Louis was successful a few years ago in that, and I don't know that it's working out super well for them. I don't know. I can't speak to St. Louis, but they were successful in getting that on the ballot and getting the state of Missouri the voters of Missouri to approve it. So we could probably do that here. Right now, what we need to make sure we do is we have a good relationship with the police board of commissioners, and I think the mayor and others are working hard to make sure that happens. And so yeah, I think it would, but it's going to take some time for us to get there.
Great, thank you. We have a little bit more time here. I know it's right at 5 o'clock. Are you good to answer one or two more questions, Councilman Bunch?
Sure.
Great. All right, so this first question is from Tim Johnston. He asks, what is the progress on the fire station that serves the northern part of the 4th District? Will the fire station be ready to be back in operation by November, as residents were told?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have an answer for you right now. However, Chrissy and I will get an update from Chief Mays to find out what's going on there. Some of you may remember that when Fire Station 15 up in I'm blanking on the area where it is, but Station 15 way up farther north opened. They closed down Station 40, which is not in the 4th District, but serves a lot of the north part of the 4th District north of the river. And the reason was it was outdated and it was unhealthy and potentially dangerous. And so we found some money to invest in revamping that so that it can serve the north, continue to serve the Northland. So I know it's underway. I'll have to get an update for you, Tim, to make sure that I'm giving you accurate information.
Great, thank you. And then final question we'll ask today is from Robert Russell. What are the top 3 qualities Councilman Bunch will look for in candidates for the city manager and public works director?
Oh, those are good ones. Here's my take on it, and I'm kind of thinking out loud, I guess, but I believe strongly that, going back to that question, the very first question about breaking down silos, the first quality that I'm looking for, and I've already expressed this to the search committee who's looking for the new city manager, and the public works director, all the same answers really apply to that when the public works director permanently will be hired by the new city manager. So I would just put that out there right now that there will not be a permanent city or public works director until we have a new city manager who hires that public works director. So what I'm looking for is someone who is a leader internally. I think for too long, and I don't fault Troy Schulte. I think he did a fantastic job as city manager at a time when things were so uncertain with basically the beginning of the Great Recession he walked into, and I think did a lot to really elevate the city in a way that we needed to be, and he made a great partner with Mayor Sly James. What I think the next phase of the city management really looks like is making sure that we're doing everything we can to support the high quality staff at City Hall. At the 7,000 employees we as a city employ, making sure that we're unlocking the true potential of those individuals. I know that sounds kind of fluffy, but we need to make sure that people have clear expectations of what their job is, clear expectations of what it means to succeed in their job, and clear feedback on when they're not doing that well. I think that's something that we are largely missing right now. It's hit or miss between the departments. But I also want a city manager who facilitates a culture of creative thinking and problem solving, and empowers the directors and by extension the other staff underneath them to use creative thinking and to problem solve and be nimble and be ready to change and quickly, and not be so bogged down in anyone who's ever tried to get their street fixed, like because people are driving too fast down my street, like the response is often, well, apply for PIAC, and then out of PIAC we'll tell you need an $80,000 study to tell you exactly what you already expressed was the concern, that people are driving too fast in the street, and then we've just spent $80,000 and have no money to make the recommended improvements. So things like that, we need to make sure that we're empowering the public works department in that case on how to do things more nimbly and learn from other cities and learn from our own successes of implementing projects quickly and creatively. And we have the power to do that. We have the power within our city staff, and we have great talent who often, I think, go unrewarded and they leave. And so that all trickles down from who's in the position of city manager. So the qualities that I'm looking for are a true leader, a visionary, but more about a visionary for what it takes to create a good, solid working team of staff, and that they're working towards the goal. I want someone who's going to encourage creative thinking among the staff. Those are really the big qualities that I've been looking for, and I think that a lot of my colleagues share that same approach.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Councilman Bunch. We really appreciate you setting some time aside to answer questions from folks around Kansas City. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap things up?
No, Eli, I just want to say thank you, Northland Neighborhoods Inc. for putting this on. I think it looked like I was kind of watching the total number. It looked like we peaked out at 102 or 103 people participating, which is great. I think that's one of the largest ones that I've done so far on these virtual town halls, or virtual events. So thanks so much for all the effort you put into this. You did a great job with moderating. This is fantastic. And thanks everyone for joining in and listening to me ramble for an hour and 10 minutes. This is a really great thing. So hopefully we can do this more regularly. I had every intention of doing more regular engagements, quarterly town halls and area meetings across the different parts of the city. And we were unfortunately hindered. That plan was hindered by COVID-19. So this, I think, just set a new standard for how we can do this in the future, at least while we're still under the social distancing guidelines. So thanks a lot.
Wonderful. Yeah, you're certainly welcome. And for everyone who's joined, once again, I'm Eli O'Sullivan Kurtz. I'm the operations specialist at Northlands Neighborhoods Incorporated. We have hosted this event for you all, and we have recorded it. We'll give the councilman time to review the video before we post it anywhere live, but you're welcome to check back in if it gets posted to review all of that. So apologies to everyone who wasn't able to get their question answered this time. It looks like we had maybe around 10 questions that we couldn't get to. Some of those will be reaching out to you individually. Otherwise, you're welcome to come to a future event. We may be asking or relating the questions to the counselors there. In the meantime, everyone stay safe out there and please enjoy your post-holiday weekend. Take care.